Good morning, Sir Jason. Chapter 8, Imagining a Nation. Philippines had improved in such a way that it was possible for many Crowell and mestizo families to send their sons to school not only in Manila, but also in Europe. The young Filipino students sojourning to the peninsula will awaken in their minds ideas about progress and love for their motherland. 19th century economic conditions sa Pilipinas ay umunlad sa parang posible para sa maraming pamilyang Crewel and mestizo na makapag-aral ng kanilang mga anak hindi lamang sa Manila kundi maging sa Europa. Ang pamamalagi ng mga kabataang Pilipino sa peninsula ay magpupuyat sa kanilang isipan ng mga ideya tungkol sa pag-unlad at pagmamahal sa kanilang inang bayan. In 19th century Spain was also going through several processes of change. Politically speaking, the restoration put back into place monarchy of Alfonso XII and established the constitutional monarchy with a bicameral legislature. The Constitution of 1876 ensured that political stability relied on the rotation of liberal and conservative parties in government. The parliamentary system of two parties, however, was weakened by managed election and numerous turnovers of government employees. Sa ika-19 na siglo ay dumaan din ang Espanya sa ilang proseso ng pagbabago sa politika. Ibinalik ang restoration ng monarkiya ni Alfonso XII at nagtatag ng monarkiya ng constitutional na may bicameral lehislatura. Tiniyak ng Constitution ng 1876 na ang politikang katatagan ay umaasa sa pag-ikot ng liberal at conservative ng mga partido sa gobyerno. Ang parliamentary system ng dalawang partido gayunpaman ay humina sa pamamagitan ng pinamahalaang halalan at maraming turnovers ng mga empleyado sa gobyerno. The young Filipino student also observed the difference in the position of church in Spain. While the Constitution of 1876 declared Catholicism as the religion of the state, private and practice of other religions was tolerated. More significantly, the church and little influence political matters. Napansin din ng mga kabataang Pilipinong estudyante ang pagkakabi ng posisyon ng simbahan sa Espanya habang idineklara ng Constitution ng 1876 ang Katolisismo bilang relihiyon ng Estado. Pinahintulutan ng pribadong pagsasagawa ng ibang relihiyon, higit sa lahat ang simbahan ay may kaunting impluwensya sa mga usapin sa politika. The environment where the Filipinos immersed themselves, therefore, was one where ideas of progress could be experienced and exchanged freely. Political and religious institutions could be questioned and attacked without fear of reprisal. It was an environment that allowed this young Filipino student to think, question, and imagine what a nation is. Ang kapaligiran kung saan isinubsob ng mga Pilipino ang sarili sa makatuwid ay isang kung saan ang ideya ng pag-unlad ay maaaring maipahayag at malayang makipagpalitan. Ang mga institusyong pampolitika at reliyon ay maaaring tanungin at atakihin ng walang takot sa pagiganti. Ito ay isang kapaligiran na nagbigay ng daan sa mga kabataang Pilipinong mag-aral na mag-isip, magtanong at pag-isip kung ano ang isang bansa.
Chapter 8, Imagining a Nation. Group 3 on Video Report. Cruz Norman M. Colonies' equality of rights and equal opportunities for progress. Although it could not be determined whether the newspaper was a Filipino project, Filipinos such as Graciano Lopez Heina and Pedro Govantes y Azcaraga were involved as staff members. Other Filipinos, including Rizal and Eduardo Dalete, also contributed articles concerned with socio-political and economic reforms in the Philippines. During the time Rizal's first novel, Noli Me Tangere, came out in 1887. Another newspaper titled España and Filipinas began its publication through the support of the Filipinos, Creoles and Mestizos in Madrid. The newspapers was short-lived as was because of glaring differences and internal feuding among its staff. With the end of the newspapers emerged a stronger Filipino community united in its purpose to continue working for Filipino rights. By January 1889, the Filipino community in Barcelona began preparations for publication of a new periodical. Among the early supporters who helped with finances were Mariano Ponce and Pablo Rianzares. On the other hand, Graciano Lopez Jaina offered his services as editor. Marcelo H. Del Pilar, having arrived from Manila at this time, also joined the efforts. The newspaper La Solidaridad released its first issue on February 15, 1889. In its first article, the staff defined its program as to combat all reaction, to impede all retrogression, to upload and all accept every liberal idea, to defend all progress. Among the reforms the newspaper sought were Philippine representation in the Cortes, freedom of the press, and the end of the practice of exiling residents without due process. The periodical placed particular emphasis on affairs dealing with the Philippines because of all Spain's overseas provinces. It was the only one that lacked parliamentary representation. La Solidaridad often ran articles dealing with Spanish politics, attacks on fairs, and reforms for the Philippines. Sections were also assigned to accommodate and print letters from foreign correspondents. All speaking of situations on the ground, aside from the political and economic content, the periodical gave space for the publication of literary works as well.
Good day, Sir Jason. I'm Jumel Arbotista, BS Criminology 2A. So my topic is Aims of La Solidaridad. Our aims. Modest. Very modest. Indeed are our aspirations. Our program, aside from being harmless, is very simple. To fight all reaction, to hinder all step backward, to applaud and to accept all liberal and defend progress. In brief, to be propagandists above all of the ideas of democracy so that this might reign over all nations here and beyond the seas. The aims of La Solidaridad are defined to gather to collect liberal ideas which are daily exposed in the camp of politics, in the fields of science, arts, letter, commerce, agriculture, and industry. We shall also discuss all problems which deal with the general interests of all the nation, seeking solutions that are purely national and democratic. We shall pay special attention to the Philippines because those islands need the most help, having been deprived of representation in the courts. We shall thus fulfill our patriotic duty in the defense of democracy in those islands. The nation of 8 million souls should not and must not be the exclusive patrimony of theocracy and convertism. Indifference to our archipelago will not be so good for Spain's. integrity in the Philippines. The country is attuned to progress. The heart of the nation longs for legitimate hopes. We shall hopes of a better life, and we do not believe in any political theory which will discuss such. Please with the classic we shall see. We believe we believe therefore that by offering this study the problems mentioned above and those relating to them we shall be in our humble way of service to the nation and her institutions. So, what are the aims of the newspaper La Solidaridad? La Solidaridad was established to express the goal of the propaganda movement toward achieving assimilation with Spain. The first issue of La Solidaridad came out on February 15, 1889, a fortnightly and biweekly newspaper. La Solidaridad serves as the principal organ of the reform movement in Spain. What are the ill effects of theocracy and conservatism? The two con- the two concepts are not the same. Conservatism simply means a general commitment to establish principle and practice. It is entirely possible to be a secular conservatism. A theocracy, on the other hand, though it tends to be conservative, conservative in practice, derives its principles from divine authority. This requires some means of consulting God or the gods, a spokesman or prophets or oracles, or else on historical text that is held to be authoritative. In most theocracies, some combination of this is involved.
Good day, sir. Mariel Agsalog, BS Criminology 2A. Chapter 7, Activity 2. Ano ba ang ibig sabihin ng propaganda? Propaganda is information used to promote or publicize a particular cause or point of view. It is often constructed with the intention to manipulate or incite an audience into action. Because of its natures, there is an urgent and important need to determine. May mga example tayo and definition of propaganda. Number 1 is propaganda types is name calling or stereotyping typing. Definition naman niya ay giving a person or idea a derogatory name. Example niya ay communist and fascist. Number 2 is glaring generalities or definition niya as emotionally applying praise that links person or idea that highly valued concept and belief. It is a usually words. An example niya naman ay common good and freedom. And number 3 is transfer. A respected personality, symbol that carries respect, authority, or prestige. Ang example naman ng number 3 ay example, when a president photographed together when the country flags. And number 4 is testimonial. Ang definition naman niya ay a respected personality endorsing an idea as a good or bad. Ang example naman yan ay when an actor endorse a product in a commercial. And the last number is number 5, bundwagan. And definition is asking an audience to accept an idea or else they will miss out. An example niyan ay be the first, and this is the move of the natures.
Juan Ataide. It had the support of Spaniards who are sympathetic toward the Filipinos. The Circulo published a bi-weekly newspaper titled Revista de Circulo Hispano-Filipino in 1882. But the newspaper and the organization itself were short-lived and list only until 1883. Despite the demise of the Revista del Círculo, Círculo Hispano-Filipino, the Filipinos in Spain continued to write and engage in journalism. In 1883, a periodical called Los Dos Mundos came out in the intention of demanding for the overseas Hispanic 100 the life and work of Jose Rizal. Colon is equality of the right and equal opportunities for progress. Although it could not be determined whether the newspaper was a Filipino project, Filipinos such as Graciano Lopez Hiana and Pedro Guvantes Azcárraga were involved as staff members. Other Filipinos, including Rizal and Eduardo de Lete, also contributed articles concerned with the social, political, and economic reform in the Philippines. During the time of Rizal, first novel Noli Me Tangere came out in 1887. Another newspaper titled España and Filipino began its publication through the support of Filipinos, Creoles, and Mestizon in Madrid. The newspaper was short-lived as well because of glaring difference in international feuding among its staff. With the end of the newspaper emerged a stronger Filipino community united in its purpose to continue working for Filipino rights. By January 1887, the Filipinos community in Barcelona began the preparation for the publication of a new periodical. Among the early supporters who helped with finance were Marciano Ponce and Pablo Rianzares. On the other hand, Graciano Lopez Giana offered his service as editor. Marcelo H. del Pilar, having arrived from Manila at this time, also joined the efforts. The newspapers La Solidaridad released its first issue on February 15, 1889. It is the first article of staff defined its program as to combat all reaction to impede all restoration to applaud and accept every liberal idea to defend all progress. Among the reform the newspaper sought were Philippines representation in the Cortes, freedom of press, and then of the practice of exciting residents without due prodigal place particular emphasis of affair dealing the Philippines because of the Spain overseas provinces. It was the only one that lacked parliamentary representation. La Solidaridad often ran articles dealing with Spanish politics, attacks of friars, and reform of the Philippines. Section were assigned to accommodate a print letter from foreign correspondent, all speaking of situation on the ground. Aside from the political economic content, the periodical will give space for the publication of literary work as support for the newspaper gradually increased and its roster of rights grew. Among those who eventually contributed articles were Jose Rizal, Dominador Gomez, Jose Marie Panganiban, Antonio Luna, and renowned Philippine scholar Ferdinand Blumentritt. Other Filipinos who contribute article did so using assumed names. In the time, Del Pilar gradually took all the active role of running the paper. Lopez Jaena, although the editor in the name, Press spent most of this in the cave and was known to be incapable of sustained work. By the time Del Pilar decided to move to Madrid, the paper went with him. The first issue, printed in Madrid, came out on November 15, 1889. A month later, the periodical announced the change of editorship with Del Pilar now taking the helm. By 1890, two of the most prominent members of the Filipino community in Spain began to increasingly show the differences in the stance with regard to Philippine affairs. Rizal always held the opinion that served the country better when the bring issued closer to home, one had to speak to the Filipinos rather than the Spaniards. Del Pilar, on the other hand, was a skillful politician who felt the effort of persuading the Spanish leader and officials needed to be continued, and all this was the best way to achieve the reform Filipinos were seeking. Things came to a head when on the New Year's Eve bouquet in 1891, the Filipinos in Madrid proposed they elect leader to unite their community. Rizal agreed with the proposal while Del Pilar expressed initial misgivings. Nevertheless, the voting took all resulting in the three inconclusive ballots on the first day and the two more inconclusive ballots in the next day. Rizal did eventually win the opposition as Filipinos leader, but the only truth.
Our topic today is emerging nationalism. Number 8, misuse of statistic, presenting statistic but leaving out of some integral parts. Election surveys that show which is the politician is the leading but do not show how big the sample size is. Number 9, fear. Using fear to convince people to believe in an idea, an insurance flyer or pampabelt showing pictures of houses destroyed by floods. Number 10, ad hominem attack, deflection, attacking the person and undermine his or her arguments. You are not young, understand. Criteria, purpose, propaganda materials, purpose or message is clearly explained in the analysis. Propaganda materials, purpose or message explained, but some details are missing in the analysis. Propaganda materials, purpose or message is not explained at all in the analysis. Propaganda type use. Propaganda type is use is clearly explained. Propaganda type use explained, but some details are missing. Propaganda type use is not explained. Specific details about the propaganda materials mentioned in the analysis. Little details about the propaganda materials are mentioned in the analysis. No details about the propaganda materials are mentioned in the analysis. Next is early efforts to unite the Filipino community in Spain began as early 1882 and reached height with the emergence of the newspaper LA Solidaridad in 1889. Journalism became a main newspaper for Filipinos engaged the Spanish reading public of issues concerning the Filipinos. Among the reforms they sought were representation in the Spanish courts, test, freedom of the press, and the end of the practice of exiling Filipino residents without due process. By the mid-1890s, internal feuding and lack of funds would end the propaganda movement, while few Filipinos like Rizal would bring the struggle closer to home. Bibliography: Guerrero, Milagros C. and John N. Scampchers, 1998. Kasaysayan Series, Volume 5, Reform and the Revolution, Hong Kong, Asia Publishing Company Limited, Scampcher, John N. 1991. The Making of Nation, Essay on 19th Century Filipinos, Nationalism, Quezon City, Ateneo de Manila University Press. Scampcher, John, 1997. The Propaganda Movement, 1880s. Scampchers, John, in 1985. The Creation of Filipino Consciousness, The Making of the Revolution, Quezon City, Ateneo de Manila University Press. Thomas Megan, in 2016. Orientalist Propaganda and Ilustrados Filipino Scholarship. And the End of the Spanish Colonialism, Pasig City and Avenue Publishing Incorporation. That's all my report.
Support for the newspaper gradually increased and its roster of writers grew. Among those who eventually contributed articles were Jose Rizal, Dominador Gomez, Jose Maria Panganiban, Antonio Luna, and renowned Philippines scholar Ferdinand Blumentritt. So, in this slide, Jose Rizal, Dominador Gomez, Jose Maria Panganiban, Antonio Luna, sila yung mga nag-contribute ng mga articles na nag-support ng newspaper, and kasama din dito si Ferdinand Blumentritt, nakilala bilang isang Filipino scholar. Then other Filipinos who contribute articles then so using assumed names. In time, Del Pilar gradually took on the active role of running the paper Lopez Jaina. Although editor in name, spent most of his days in cafe and was known to be incapable of sustained work. So, paglipas ng panahon, unti-unting kinuha ni Del Pilar ang active role of running the paper. Then one of the editor na si Jana Lopez ay mas ginugol ang halos lahat ng kanyang mga araw sa mga cafes at doon sa mga incapable of sustained work. So when Del Pilar decided to move to Madrid, the paper went with him. So in November 15, 1889, came out the first issue printed in Madrid. By 1890, two of the most prominent members of the Filipino community in Spain began to increasingly show difference in stance with regard to Philippine affairs. One had to speak to the Filipinos rather than the Spaniards. In 1890, dalawa sa pinakakilalang miyembro ng pamayan ng Pilipino sa Spain began to increasingly show yung difference sa paninindigan patungkol sa mga usapin sa Philippines. Rizal chose to serve the country better and mas pinili ni Rizal ang makipag-usap sa Pilipino instead sa mga Kastila. So on the other hand, Del Pilar was a skillful politician who felt that effort at persuading the Spanish leader and yung mga official na kailangan i-continue, and Del Pilar think that this is the best way to achieve the reforms Filipinos were seeking. Things came to head when at a New Year's Eve banquet in 1891, the Filipinos in Madrid proposed that they elect a leader to unite their community. So, in this slide, in 1891, things came at New Year's Eve. So, the Filipinos in Madrid proposed na pumili sila ng isang leader upang magkaisa ang kanilang community. So, Rizal agree sa proposal ng mga Filipinos sa Madrid, while Del Pilar disagree and may pag-aalinlangan sa proposal ng kanyang narinig. Thank you po, yun lamang po.